Okay, Salãmun Alaykum everyone. So today we're gonna be reading Surah 12 uh, from the beginning, God willing. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Surah 12, Joseph. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. ALR. These letters scripture. A footnote for 12.1. The Quranic initials constitute a major component of a great miracle, Appendix 1. Verse 2. We have revealed it in Arabic Quran that you may understand. A footnote. Why was the Quran revealed in Arabic? See 41-44 and Appendix 4. We narrate to you the most accurate history through the revelation of this Quran. Before this, you were totally unaware. Recall that Joseph said to his father, "O my father, I saw 11 planets and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating before me." He said, "My son, do not tell your brothers about your dream, lest they plot and scheme against you. Surely the devil is man's worst enemy. Your Lord has thus blessed you and has given you good news through your dream. He has perfected his blessings upon you and upon the family of Jacob, as he did for your ancestors, Abraham and Isaac before that. Your Lord is omniscient, most wise." In Joseph and his brothers, there are lessons for the seekers. They said, "Joseph and his brother are favored by our father, and we are in the majority. Indeed, our father is far astray." Joseph's fate already decided by God. "Let us kill Joseph or banish him, that you may get some attention from your father. Afterwards, you can be righteous people." The footnote says, "We learned from Joseph's dream that he was
Salman,
destined for a bright future.
there is
But
a
while his brothers
The voice problem.
microphone
fate was
feedback.
already decided by God.
Solomon.
Everything is done by God." Page 17. And is already recorded. 57.2. One of them said, "Do not kill Joseph. Let us throw him into the abyss of the well. Perhaps some caravan can pick him up, if this is what you decide to do." They said, "Our father, why do you not trust us with Joseph? We will take good care of him. Send him with us tomorrow to run and play. We will protect him." He said, "I worry lest you go away with him. Then the wolf may devour him while you are not watching." They said, "Indeed, if the wolf devours him with so many of us around,
Someone hasn't
then
muted their microphone.
Believers are blessed with God's assurances." Oh,
Hello? So,
okay.
there is no sound
Can you
and
guys hear me now?
Yeah,
You guys
much
we
better
can,
now.
but there is a problem though.
Okay, what happened? So I think accidentally my headphones picked up the call instead, and I
Oh,
put the headphones on the side so you could hear me. Should I read again? Where
yes,
should I from?
from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh
No,
gosh.
you
Okay.
can. Okay,
Okay. Oh, I don't mind.
you can do from 9.
I think
Okay.
someone didn't mute their microphone either.
Okay. Okay, guys, let's mute our microphones and I'll start again, God willing, from verse 9. Okay. Joseph's fate already decided by God.
Let us kill Joseph or banish him, that you may get some attention from your father. Afterwards, you can be righteous people. The footnote says that we learn from Joseph's dream that he was destined for a bright future. Thus, while his brothers met to decide his fate was already decided by God. Everything is done by God, 8:17, and is already recorded, 57:22. Number 10. One of them said, "Do not kill Joseph. Let us throw him into the abyss of the well. Perhaps some caravan can pick him up, if this is what you decide to do." They said, "Our father, why do you not trust us with Joseph? We'll take good care of him. Send him with us tomorrow to run and play. We will protect him." He said, "I worry lest you go away with him. Then the wolf may devour him while you're not watching him." They said, "Indeed, if the wolf devours him with so many of us around, then we are really losers." Believers are blessed with God's assurances. When they went away with him and unanimously decided to throw him into the abyss of the well, we inspired him. Someday you will tell them about all this while they have no idea. They came back to their father in the evening, weeping. They said, "Our father, we went racing with each other, leaving Joseph with our equipment, and the wolf devoured him. You will never believe us, even if we were telling the truth." They produced his shirt with fake blood on it. He said, "Indeed, you have conspired with each other to commit a certain scheme. All I can do is resort to a quiet patience. May God help me in the face of your conspiracy." Joseph is taken to Egypt. A caravan passed by and soon sent their water. He let down his bucket, then said, "How lucky! There is a boy here." They took him along as merchandise, and God was fully aware of what they did. They sold him for a cheap price, a few dirhams, for they did not have any need for him. The one who bought him in Egypt said to his wife, "Take good care of him. Maybe he can help us, or maybe we can adopt him." We thus established Joseph on earth, and we taught him the interpretation of dreams. God's command is always done, but most people do not know. When he reached maturity, we endowed him with wisdom and knowledge. We thus reward the righteous. God protects the believers from sin. The lady of the house where he lived tried to seduce him. She closed the doors and said, "I'm all yours." He said, "May God protect me. He's my Lord who gave me a good home." The transgressors never succeed. Joseph worded his statement in such a way that the governor's wife thought that he was talking about her husband, when in fact he was talking about God. 24. She almost succumbed to him, and he almost succumbed to her, if it were not that he saw a proof from his Lord. We thus diverted evil and sin away from him, for he was one of our devoted servants. The two of them raced towards the door, and in the process she tore his garment from the back. They found her husband at the door. She said, "What should be the punishment for one who wanted to molest your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment?" He said, "She's the one who tried to seduce me." A witness from her family suggested, "If his garment is torn from the front, then she is telling the truth and he's a liar. And if his garment is torn from the back, then she lied and he's telling the truth." When her husband saw that his garment was torn from the back, he said, "This is a woman's scheme. Indeed, your scheming is formidable." Okay, well, let's not end at a subtitle, actually. So, okay, Joseph disregarded this incident. "As for you, my wife, you should seek forgiveness for your sin. You have committed an error." Some women in the city gossiped. The governor's wife is trying to seduce her husband. She is deeply in love with him. We see that she has gone astray. When she heard the news of their gossip, she invited them, prepared for them a comfortable place, and gave each of them a knife. She then said to him, "Enter their room." When they saw him, they so admired him that they cut their hands. They said, "Glory be to God, this is not a human being. This is an honorable angel." The footnote says, this is the same word used in 538 regarding the hand of the thief. And the sum of the surah and the verse numbers, 12 plus 31 and 5 plus 38 are the same. Therefore, the thief's hand should be marked, not severed as practiced by the corrupted Islam. See footnote for 538. She said, "This is the one you blame me for falling in love with. I did indeed try to seduce him, and he refused. Unless he does what I command him to do, he will surely go to prison and will be debased." He said, "My lord, the prison is better than giving in to them. Unless you divert their scheming from me, I may desire them and behave like the ignorant ones." His Lord answered his prayer and diverted their scheming from him. He is the hearer, the omniscient. Later they saw to it, despite the clear proofs, that they should imprison him for a while. Do you guys think I should continue reading? Because it doesn't end the footnotes, subtitles.
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole chapter is about Joseph, so it's not gonna end.
38 should be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 young men were in the prison with him. One of them said, "I saw in my dream that I was making wine." And the other said, "I saw myself carrying bread." Can you guys mute, please? And the other said, "I saw myself carrying bread on my head, from which the birds were eating. Inform us of the interpretation of these dreams. We see that you're righteous." He said, "If any food is provided to you, I can inform you about it before you receive it. This is some of the knowledge bestowed upon me by my Lord. I have forsaken the religion of people who do not believe in God, and with regard to the hereafter, they're really disbelievers. And I followed instead the religion of my ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We never set up any idols besides God, such as the blessing from God upon us and upon the people, but most people are unappreciative." Okay, so I am ending here at verse 38. And so going back to the beginning of the chapter, Masha Allah, this is a really interesting chapter of the Quran, a very detailed story about the life of Jacob and Joseph. It's like a biography of Joseph's whole life, and it's amazing. There are so many amazing lessons in this story. Like God says in the Quran, and that there are lessons for the seekers. And it's amazing because in verse 7 it says, "In Joseph and his brothers, there are lessons for the seekers." And it's amazing. Like every time, I read it, like I notice something new. Mashallah. So that's the beauty of the Quran, right? But the story itself has like so much for us to learn from. Mashallah, great example for all of us, actually. So first verse, ALR, these letters are proofs of this profound scripture. And so as we can tell from the footnote, these initials are related to the Quran's mathematical code. It's one of God's great portents and the frequency of occurrence of A, L, and R, or Alif, Lam, and Ra in Arabic, ends up to be a total of a multiple of 19, and you can read more about it in Appendix 1. And then God tells us that God revealed the Quran in Arabic that we may understand. And this is interesting because why, one might ask why the Quran was revealed in Arabic. And you can read more about it in Appendix 4 and 4144. And 4144 says, language is irrelevant. If we made it a non-Arabic Quran, they would have said, why did it come down in that language? Whether it is Arabic or non-Arabic, say for those who believe, it is a guide and healing. As for those who disbelieve, they will be deaf and blind to it, as if they're being addressed from far away. And this kind of reminds me of certain comments, some people, random comments that, someone posted on YouTube, like, why are you guys reading in English? Why don't you read in Arabic? And then someone was like, oh, you guys don't understand it because you have women reading with you and stuff like that. Anyways, so, this shows us that the language
What do they say? You have what?
This is what happens when you read with women or something,
Oh, really? Women shouldn't be reading Quran?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Some ignorant person, I don't know. So, Masha Allah, so this shows to us that whether you read the Quran in English or Arabic, it doesn't matter. If you're a submitter to God who is being guided by God, this Quran provides healing and mercy. And again, verse 3, we're being reminded that God is narrating to us the most accurate history. I mean, Joseph's stories in the Bible too. And, it's pretty accurate for the most part, but this is the most accurate that we can find because it's protected by the Quran's mathematical code and verifiable information from the Quran that based on the mathematical miracle that none of this has been altered, unlike the Old Testament and the New Testament, which has been distorted. So then it talks about Joseph's dream. Joseph had a dream when he was a child. Where it says in verse 4, he saw 11 planets and the sun and the moon that were prostrating before them. And as we see later in the story, this dream actually came true at the very end of his life. I mean, at the very end of the surah, we see what happens. And so this kind of also shows to us the legitimacy of dreams, that dreams carry meaning and these things that we see. And the Messenger of the Covenant kind of explained how that whole mechanism works, but in his case, God used it as a means to give him a good news. As we read in verse 6, that your Lord has thus blessed you and has given you good news through your dream. So God can communicate with us and give us news to our dreams, as he did for Joseph. And we saw that much later in his life, this actually came true. Also, I think verse 5, actually going back, kind of, tells us about how devil is man's worst enemy. And so he said, do not tell your brothers about your dream. And so why is that? Because the father knew that the other brothers were jealous of him, jealousy. And these brothers were supposedly submitters, they were supposedly following their father, who was a monotheist, worshiping God alone. And these brothers were jealous. And I don't know if the brother told him about the dream or not, but they were always jealous of him. And they were so jealous of him that they couldn't stand him to be even part of their own family. And so they decided to kill their brother. I mean, they thought they decided to kill their brother, but God had already had this whole thing planned. And as it says in the footnote for 12:9, everything is done by God. Certain things are executed by Satan, but God allows them to be done, and ultimately it's God's plan that takes place. Satan's only being allowed to do certain things in accordance with God's will, just to prove his incompetence as a God. But the true God, is God alone, who is doing everything. And everything that happened in our life from birth to death, God already knows all of it. And but for the believers, obviously God plans for the believers their lives, and he makes sure that they're successful. And that's what we see in the story of Joseph, how he starts out by being a victim of the jealousy of the brothers, and the brothers unanimously decide to throw him in the well. But at that time, God knew that Joseph was destined to prevail, being a righteous believer in God alone, and he inspired him that that he will someday, you will tell them about this while they have no idea. So God gave him that inspiration a long time ago, and he was very young. And so this also shows to us what kind of evil schemings can people get into, even if they say they're submitters. These people are not righteous, and they scheme all these things, make up lies to cover up their schemes, and eventually, they realize that they did the wrong thing, but for the longest time, they were against him and they were scheming, and they banished him from the family by throwing him in the well. And then, I mean, look at how he was being moved, and his life was changing. From first, the people that picked him up, ended up selling him, and if they didn't find him and they didn't sell him, to someone else, I mean, he wouldn't have gone to Egypt. But this was the way that Joseph was being taken to Egypt, because a caravan that was passing by actually picked him up and bought him, and they took him along as merchandise, like like cargo. And this is how God, had him immigrate to Egypt, where he had a bright future. Of course, I think before that, I believe he was in Jerusalem or something, and maybe it wasn't a very prosperous place at the time, and so he ended up immigrating to another country and started his life in Egypt. And the woman who ended up buying him was actually the governor's wife. So he ended up even though he was kind of thrown in the well by his brothers and abandoned in that fashion, they thought they just got what they wanted. He had a bright future, and he ended up living a very comfortable life by growing up in this household with the governor's wife. And this is why it says in verse 21, "We thus established Joseph on earth, and we taught him the interpretation of dreams." Now, this is something that God gave to him as a gift, and he endowed him with, when he reached maturity, God says he endowed him with wisdom and knowledge. And that's something that I think we should all pray to God for, to increase our knowledge and grant us the wisdom, to understand the Quran. If we don't have wisdom to understand, all the knowledge in the world is not going to help us. And guidance, many people are knowledgeable, but they don't have wisdom and they're not guided. And all that knowledge in the world is useless if you don't know how to apply it in your life, and you're just as blind as everyone else. And I think a good example of that, as God gives, is like donkeys, carrying great works of literature, when you have all this information that you can't use. And I think verse 23 is very interesting too, because it shows to us, as the subtitle says, God protects the believers from sin. So this shows to me that if you are a believer, like, you cannot, like, God would not allow you to commit sins. He would stop you from even committing sins that, other people would end up committing. So when you deliberately go and commit sins, that as a submitter, that reflects on you. That if you're not there yet, if you're a believer, God would not allow you to commit sin. As we know, for example, God did not allow Abraham to sacrifice his son. He substituted Ishmael in his place. I mean, he substituted the animal instead of Ishmael, so that Abraham doesn't commit sin. And we see the same thing here, that God diverted it from him, and God allowed him to be saved, and God didn't let him succumb to this sort of a lustful trap by Satan. And this was evil and sin, and it says in verse 24, we thus diverted evil and sin away from him, for he was one of our devoted servants. So we should all, I think, try and aspire to be like that, that we grow our souls to the level that we're not able to be tempted by stuff like that, and then God will prevent us from falling into some kind of trap like that, and God will strengthen us that we don't end up committing any sins like that, or any kind of sins. And then it also shows to us how this woman schemed against Joseph. Even though she tried to sexually molest him, but when she was caught in the act of trying to do that by her husband, she actually threw the blame at Joseph and lied. And these are people on earth that we meet also that are like that, because people will lie to save themselves and to throw you under the bus even if they're at fault. But that's what the disbelievers do. They bear false witness and spread lies, or accuse people of things that they haven't done just so they can save themselves. And that's exactly what Joseph's wife did. But it's interesting that in verse 28, even though his husband knew that it was the wife who tried to molest him, they saw to it later that they should imprison him for a while, because Joseph asked God, and he implored God that the prison is better than giving in to them, and so he was allowed to go to prison so that he could stay away. Now, it doesn't mean going to prison is a good thing and people should be proud of it. Like some people go to prison and then they read this story and like, wow, like Joseph was in prison and that's so amazing. That's not what it's about. But he was allowed to be in prison as part of God's plan. So he can be saved later on. And Masha Allah, we see that this as later through his history, that his being in the prison was for a very good reason, because this is how God allowed him to meet these people in the prison who were later going to work for the king, and he was going to be appointed as the treasurer. But of course we're not there yet. Also, these dreams that they had were pretty interesting. The two people that he met, it says 2 young men were in the prison with them. One of them said, I saw in my dream that I was making wine, and the other said, I saw myself carrying bread on my head, from which the birds were eating. And then we don't get to the interpretation yet. That's for next week. So join us, or you can read it yourself. But I like how Joseph had the information that he says, if any food is provided to you, I can inform you about it before you receive it. This is some of the knowledge bestowed upon me by my Lord. I have forsaken the religion of people who do not believe in God, and with regard to the hereafter, they're really disbelievers. Now, along with the interpretation of dreams and the food being provided, these old types of miracles were made off meat, and this was, based on, this was one of the miracles too that was given to Joseph, was that I believe he was able to tell people, about their food, and the same thing for Jesus. And but apparently there's some new fake messengers that are claiming to have the same miracles, like, oh, I'll tell you what food you ate today and stuff like that. And one of them happens to be female, actually. And I mean, we know that God doesn't send female messengers. In fact, and this female messenger claims to be the first female messenger. Actually, someone posted her whole, it was like a big declaration, like an official declaration of a messenger, like a legal document. And one of them was like, oh, I can tell you, like, from this date on, I can tell, who ate what, when, and things like that. Just really weird. But we know clearly from the explanations and from what we find in the Quran that God doesn't send female messengers. And God says in the Quran that he sends, he made messengers, husbands with wives. And then I was reading in another place that this was basically, sorry, I lost my trail of thought because someone just posted the question on YouTube. And so, yeah, so what I was saying that, yeah, he was posting, I was just reading yesterday in this perspective where he was talking about how God will not send female messengers, and, look what they do to the males, and imagine if there were females or something like that. I have to go back and look at it again. But someone asked me, what is my relation to Rashad Khalifa? I mean, I follow the messenger, that's all. I'm not related biologically. Okay. And so that concludes my reading. I'm sorry I didn't keep track of time, but I think I'm okay. God willing, you guys can comment now or ask questions. Thank you. Anyone?
Salãmun Alaykum. I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, Masha Allah, God talks about the most accurate history in this surah. 12:3. We narrate to you the most accurate history through the revelation of this Quran. Before this, you were totally unaware. So that's the part. We know that by the time Quran came, the previous messages were or scriptures were corrupted by humans. A lot of innovations had entered, and Prophet Muhammad had no knowledge of previous scriptures because he was from the Gentiles who were not following a particular scripture at the time, and he had no knowledge what was in it. And the way this surah has been narrated. This is the only surah which is just one story from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, every story, every surah or chapter of Quran has several aspects or different histories and different. Suddenly, God will be talking about one thing and then something else will come. But this is a narration, uh, and if you look at Surah 12, actually, uh, the story of Joseph hasn't changed much in other scriptures as well. So, but here God is telling us the preservation, um, the most accurate history through the Quran. And when God says that and you might find fragments of truth here and there, or some truth, some falsehood, but you can never call it like, okay, after we have received Quran, that it has, you know, superseded previous books. We really do not need to go back and find the accurate history of about anything.
Mhm.
That was one thing. Yeah, and the Gentile prophet, the Prophet Muhammad was not an uneducated man. He was Gentile, means those who did not receive or studied the previous scriptures. Like Jews call them Gentiles too, like uh, non-Jew. Yeah. So these were Jewish prophets, right?
Mhm.
Before. And so anybody who did not follow the scripture was called the Gentile. For now, that's it.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I I was getting some comments on YouTube. And some persons in denial
Why
about
don't you answer those first and then?
mathematical code. They're saying it does not exist. The mathematical code does not exist. It's ridiculous.
Maybe he needs glasses.
Yeah. It would not exist for them.
Yeah.
Those who would not study it and disregard it before studying, Quran talks about it that, they have rejected previously. Many proofs were rejected as well. So obviously, there is nothing new in this time either.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to say to people who are watching this to read Appendix 1, that the mathematical code of the Quran exists. It's real, it's physical and tangible, so you can verify it. And it's not something you can deny it because it's really physical. And also, if you want to learn about Rashad Khalifa being a messenger, read Appendix 2. And if you've read it and you still don't believe it, then it's too bad. But it really he went into great length to prove from the Quran that he was a messenger, and that's all. But yeah, I mean, so much information in this whole story of Joseph. Especially one thing I forgot to add was the reaction of Joseph's father in all of this. Like this is so amazing. Like such, I mean, exemplary devotion to God and trust in God. It says in verse 18, they produce a shirt with fake blood on it. He said, indeed, you have conspired with each other to commit a certain scheme. So Joseph's father knew that they schemed against his son. They knew the blood was fake. They knew they were lying. And he says, indeed, you have conspired with each other to commit a certain scheme. All I can do is resort to a quiet patience. I mean, it's really hard to imagine. And then he's asking God for help. He said, "May God help me in the face of your conspiracy." So I think these are what God calls like honorable traits. First he went and got into a situation, and then there's nothing he can do. They got into that. I mean, what is he gonna do? You can kick and scream, but like it's something that he knows that it's God's plan, and they have conspired. And obviously he's not objecting to what God is doing, because he knows that Joseph is destined for a bright future. And but he knows that all he can do really in this situation is to resort to a quiet patience. I mean, he could any other father would get angry and agitated and beat the kids, probably, if they did something like that, and just probably go to jail in the process or something, but this is how he handled it. And I mean, it wasn't easy. There were a lot of these brothers, and he was Jacob was a very, very patient servant of God.
Salãmun Alaykum.
Salãmun Alaykum.
Thanks for reading. I want to comment on verse 13 and 14.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Jacob saying, "I worry lest you go away with him, then the wolf may devour him while you are not watching him." And then they respond, they said, "Indeed, if the wolf devours him, with so many of us around, then we are really losers." So I just wanted to comment on this part.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you can recognize how Jacob set up a trap for these kids. Or, I don't know what age they were, if they were teenagers or older. But he set a trap for them. He gave them the excuse that they would later use, and that's how he knew. And that's how he knew they were gonna, if they were gonna lie or whatever. So they basically admitted their own crime. They admitted they did something. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then never mess with wise people.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. It's very interesting.
Never mess with wise people. Yeah. Yeah, also they said they produced a shirt with fake blood on it, I don't know how fake that blood would be, like if there was blood of an animal or if it was just like paint or something.
No, it must have been an animal.
Well, it says fake blood. It doesn't say
Strange.
blood. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they were like kids drawing on the shirt, or maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they found like juice or something, or some whatever wasn't blood.
Yeah.
A rabbit's blood, maybe.
Yeah.
So one of the things, God talks about in this surah is that there are many lessons, right? And yeah, like you were saying, Salman, every time you read this surah, you find something new that is as a lesson, Basically, what in the Quran, it's probably 99% previous history.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know. I could be exaggerating the number, I don't know. And the rest are the commandments. So the history is for us to learn lessons from the history, right? Um, because why else God would just leave commandments and that would be it, right? It would be like a one few pages of commandments, and you have to believe in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
this is your scripture, this is for your salvation, this is what you do. But there is so much history for us to learn lessons for every situation. That's why Quran is fully detailed and a complete book,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because previous messengers also brought the same message. Worship God alone, follow the scripture. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happened to them uh, was that we don't get confused when the same thing gets repeated again, right? We
Mm-hmm.
will be familiar with those scenarios, what happened to the previous messengers or prophets, how people did not believe in them, how did not believe in the miracles they performed. Every time a messenger came with something new, people did not like it. Anyway, but in this surah, there's so many lessons, but one of the lessons I learned the human side of messengers. Joseph's father, Jacob, uh, he knew all along, because when he heard Joseph's dream that Joseph will get a prominent position one day, and at a king's, and his brothers will be, you know, scheming and everything. He knew about it, but
Mm-hmm.
and he knew when Joseph was gone that he's alive. He Jacob was a messenger, a prophet, but he cried so much, he grieved him so much that he lost his eyesight. That tells you the human side of, no matter if you are even a messenger, right? A
Mm-hmm.
prophet, you have the assurance, you know that you have the knowledge that your son will be safe. But his love for his child was so deep that he couldn't control it, and he paid the price. When we idolize our children, you know, in a way, why would he lose his eyesight? That he committed an act of idol worship, that his devotion should not be this much to his child. He should have just patience, that God is going to protect him, God is going to protect him. This was his test, and the test became very long, because even his brother felt that his love for Joseph and his brother was way more than them. That's also was his weakness. So I take it as a first lesson we learn here, uh, that all messengers are human, and they're tested through their weaknesses, you know, and sometimes they fail first, but God gives them a chance, just like Jacob was tested through severe hardship until he, repented, and then same thing with Jacob. That's what I wanted to say for now.
Masha
I want to make a comment. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey guys, I read when I became a submitter. I didn't have religion before, so Quran is the first book that I was able to read. I couldn't even understand the Bible, and not the regular, not just any Quran. This AEVQ, Authorized English Version by Rashad Khalifa, and this story about Joseph had me confused for a long time, and because I saw a lot of bad things happening to him. And I realized he never did anything wrong, but bad things were being done to him all the time. And then there was another thing I came to a realization is like, wait a minute. All these bad people were doing bad things, but in the end, it ended up being what God planned. Now you get it? It's like, well, God planned for him to be in this well so that these people would pick him up and take him over here, and then this lady would have him thrown in prison, where this guy would find him in the prison and make him a treasurer, and then he would become this and that, and then he would go through his stages to become even more prominent in the world. And even though every step of the way was God's ultimate plan, was God's destiny for him, these evil people doing these bad things were actually playing into God's plan. So it makes me like, who's actually doing everything? Like they're doing their evil, but God is actually running everything.
Yeah.
So I think for believers, that's a good thing. If you want to be a submitter and a believer, you can hope that no matter what anybody does, that God has a plan for you. But I hear people say this all the time, but they don't believe in they believe in, oh, whatever, God has a plan for me, I go with it. But they don't believe in the part about giving their life to God and reforming and repenting and leading a blameless life, like in the Psalms, so that in the end you will be like Joseph. Because if you're not going to be like David in the Psalms, then you're not going to end up like Joseph. God might have a plan for you, and people might do bad things to you, but it's not going to end up good for you. Might not. But he deserved that in the end, it turned out good for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I had a multiple phase comment there. What is that person saying on Facebook, on YouTube, though, by the way? They don't believe in the math miracle?
Yeah, they were saying it doesn't exist. First, they were saying, "Well, are we saying he's a messenger?" I'm like, "Yes." And then they're saying that a miracle doesn't exist.
Okay, that's interesting.
We can't do much about that.
Sounds like a Pharaoh. Pharaoh didn't believe anything Moses presented either. People of Noah.
Yeah, exactly. Any miracle you show them, they would not believe.
Tell them to just
And
wait
the
for the
person
smoke.
is saying, oh, laughingly, you believe only Quran? Oh, did God tell you to believe Quran, Hadith, and Sunnah? Really?
There was some guy, some traditional Muslim, who posted a video of a mufti or a imam who was preaching that the Quran is like the enemy of Islam.
And this guy was a Muslim?
Yeah, like
this guy is saying without Bukhari you cannot understand the religion.
If you follow the Quran only alone, then you will be misguided. It's Satan's plan to follow the Quran alone.
What?
And he was quoting some hadith, but I couldn't find the hadith.
But it's true, though, for the evil people, because the evil people will be misguided by the Quran because they deserve to be misguided.
Yeah, but the Bukhari first hadith was written 250 years after Prophet's death, and he started to collect hearsay from other people. Did God send Bukhari to complete the religion of Islam after Prophet Muhammad died, or did God say Quran is complete and fully detailed book? Anyway, it's up for them to judge that.
So there's a new movement, basically, that is, or a new teaching that is spreading among the Muslim community, the traditionalists, that following the Quran alone is dangerous.
Yeah, the Dajjal will be doing that.
So it's like a new brainwashing technique that these imams are spreading.
Well, Satan has made them believe that, right? They're
Yeah.
completely taken over by Satan. What else we can do?
I want to comment on verse 19.
Okay.
Mhm.
A caravan passed by and soon sent their waterer. He let down his bucket, then said, "How lucky! There is a boy here." They took him along as merchandise, and God was fully aware of what they did. Okay, so what the beep is happening here? Why didn't they ask, "Oh, are you lost? Who's your father? Where is your home? Do you know where you live? Let us take you home."
Mhm.
No, it was like, "Oh, look, a boy. Okay, I will take him."
Mhm.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy times.
a crazy
Mhm.
time because these were gypsies probably, and they were just take whatever you grab from here, sell it the next station. You know.
Mhm.
This is crazy. This explains what kind of a crazy time this was.
Because there must be a lot of money for slave, right? To sell a
Yeah,
slave.
Well, it said they sold him for a few dirhams.
yeah. A few dirham, you useless kid.
Oh my God.
But I okay. After that, I have a question.
Okay, I'm done.
Go ahead, Ahmed.
No. That was it. Just crazy times. Okay, I will continue. And then today you have all these benefits, and we live in such a peaceful times, and there's so many helps, so many.
Yeah, but there is still kids are being sold
Yeah, of course.
as sex slaves and whatnot,
Yeah,
and
that's a big
slavery
problem.
is not gone.
Yeah, it's not gone,
Has
but
every kind of form.
in general,
Oh, of course, very different times now.
so people take it for granted, and then they read the scripture, and they think, oh, they don't understand that those were times that were very harsh, and God is giving us instructions to prevent such harsh times from ever happening again. So
Huh.
that's why it's so dangerous to uh, have another religion. That's why all other religions are dangerous. They are a threat to mankind. Okay, no insult to people, but the only way for mankind to move forward is to follow God's commandments.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is one verse. Now my question is, or kind of wonder that Joseph was still a young kid, maybe I don't know, 10, 11-year old or something like that, and they pushed him in, they threw him in the well, right? Now can you imagine the fear? uh, but doesn't seem like, I feel like he was still being protected by our angels or something, or God took away his fear from him. Otherwise, like, somebody would be scarred for life, right? An innocent child, and then they sell him as a slave. Now, if you see this verse, 12:24, she almost succumbed to him, and he almost succumbed to her, if it were not that he saw a proof from his Lord. So God showed him something suddenly, so he ran towards the door, because otherwise she was successful in seducing him. Uh, so God showed him something like, don't do this, right? This is how God saved him. Um, so I never paid attention to this part before. Like, if it were not that he saw a proof from his Lord. Like something he saw nobody else could see. Maybe an angel popped up and showed him face like, don't, or held him his feet like something like, controlled him
Mm-hmm.
and saved him from committing the sin. Otherwise, he almost did it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, look at that. Like God showed him some kind of a sign, a proof, like a miracle,
Mm-hmm.
which saved him. Yeah. Otherwise, there's a lot of human weaknesses are shown in this story, and that how God is he's the only source of righteousness. Like when humans become weak and commit sins, the process of purification goes on until we ourselves are able to control. Otherwise, when God knows that somebody is still worthy of, they will make it to heaven. God knows because we don't know, right? And then God will give them a pinch and save them from committing major sins and whatnot, uh, until their soul is purified and so strong that no matter what kind of temptation comes, it would not bother them, you know. Subhanallah.
Masha Allah.
I have another comment. Like
Go
I have
ahead.
a question. God did not have to have all those people do all those things to Joseph in order for God to achieve his final plan was to have Joseph in the position he put him in. He could have just put him in that position, but he must have done it for a good reason. There had to be a reason he let this all happen. He didn't have to let it happen.
Yep.
Probably so that it would be down in the scripture for us.
Mm-hmm.
The history a lesson.
First.
Well, that was part of his journey to become like, for whatever purification he needed, right? For, or the wisdom he needed for later on, uh, to be who he was. Like obviously Joseph was a prophet too, right? And so was Jacob, and the whole family was supposed to be very pious and pure, and but God had to. I mean, everybody goes through the test, even all the prophets and messengers, and like to bring their true colors out and that make them stronger, their soul growth, whatnot. I also have a comment on number 33. He said, "My Lord, the prison is better than giving in to them. Unless you divert this scheming from me, I may desire them and behave like the ignorant ones." So, in my opinion, one of the lessons I learned from this is that, remember Rashad said in his audio that we should not be asking for a test, right? He could
Mm-hmm.
have asked God for something better, that remove this scheming from me, you know? He challenged. He said, "I'd rather be in the prison than being the victim." Why? And he went to the prison innocent, you know? Like how painful it is when we sometimes see a story on TV that somebody went to prison for so many years for the crime they didn't commit. And he asked God for prison, you know? Like, why would you ask something like that while knowing God? Like, obviously, he was a believer. And I'd rather be in a prison, you know. You could have asked for anything better than that. And God gave him then prison, you know. Okay, you asked for it. Even though there were lessons
No,
he had to learn, but still, why would he
wait.
ask?
Can I interject?
Yes, please go ahead. I'm done.
Those were the options that he was given by them, by the tyrants. It's not like he just thought of the idea himself, like, hey, put me in prison. And God said, what a good idea. No, that's what they said to him. It's either you do what we say or you go to prison. And he said, I choose to not do what you say and go to prison.
Yeah, the
Otherwise, he
option.
could have
But
said,
Oh,
but
get me
let
out of here.
sorry.
can you see the later part? He goes, unless you divert their scheming from me, I may desire them and behave like the ignorant ones. He thought that that is the better option to be away from
No,
this whole thing.
they're the ones who gave him the prison option. He's not going to say, how is that even
No,
good?
but I'm talking about Joseph's prayer. He's asking God. Could he have not asked that, you know, that unless
Ah, yeah, yeah.
divert their scheming
It
from me?
doesn't negate the fact that they're the
When
ones who
we
gave
pray
him
to
the
God, we don't
ultimatum.
pray for something bad. We pray.
It doesn't negate the fact that the ones in control threaten him. Either you do
I
what we
know.
say or you go to jail.
So
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not.
She's
He's
those
talking
were.
of. She's
Hold
No,
on.
no, no.
I'm
She's
trying
saying
to
that he
say
asked for
something,
permission,
Edward.
like
no,
that's
no,
his
no.
idea and he wanted it,
Listen,
and God agreed with him that that's a good idea. That's not
I
a good idea.
I
Why
know.
would God think that it's good to put him in prison to hurt him?
Okay,
It
so
was
now
actually the tyrants who did.
I know
Yeah,
what you're saying, but let me finish it. They, no matter what options they gave, horrible options. When you pray, God says, "Pray to me, and I'm responding to your prayers." He look at the part. God, he's giving God either this or that, right? Unless you divert their scheming from me, I may desire them. He could have asked for he could have asked for a miracle, like, please divert their scheming from me, period.
yeah.
He's giving God choices. I mean, we're not talking about the governor. We're talking about Joseph and his relationship with God. I'm
Well,
just saying, if
I
something
think
just
also,
makes me
no, I
weird,
think, yeah,
gives me
I
weird
think,
ideas,
yeah,
like,
yeah. I
why
think,
would
you
he
know what?
ask like that?
Yeah, I think like when we see like God's plan, like I mean, there's probably a lot of wisdom in it too, you know, because like let's say when let's say if he just says, you know, like it's better it's better just do some miracle or something, you know, probably he knows that these women, let's say, are around, and he's already almost desiring them, you know. And so one way that he knows for a fact that he's not going to give in to his you know, these thoughts or these ideas is if he's in prison. Because if he's out and he knows that these women want him and they're trying to seduce him, he's so good looking too. You know, one way you can stay pure is to be away from all of this crowd. And yeah, I understand that you could potentially be safe from all of this if you were not in prison. But then, like again, you know, even the fact that he asked God to put him, that prison is better for him, is in accordance with God's plan, because
Oh,
he was
absolutely.
destined to meet these people in the prison, right?
Yeah.
So,
But everything is in accordance with God's plan, no matter what. God says
right.
whether you chop a tree or leave it standing is in accordance with God's will. Whether we're doing something intentionally or unintentionally. I I find this one of the lesson. Like, when you ask for something, even though he was gonna ask that, because obviously there are weaknesses in humans, but it was in accordance with God's plan too.
Mm,
When we
But we,
ask for a test, we jump into a test. The test is written already, that obviously, but from that test you come out from to the other end with something gained. There is already a plan. I don't know how am I explaining it, but anyway. Okay, never mind.
We also have to realize that he was speaking in the situation he was currently in. It's not like he was thinking for 5-10 minutes, deciding what to respond. So the Quran is simply recording. God is telling us what Joseph did at that moment, and that's what he asked God for. He could have asked, maybe went back to his room and prayed, "Oh God, save me from the wicked people," a different prayer, like you're saying. But he was replying a prayer in response to them, like in the situation, because he was giving them the response, his reply as well. Either the woman, the governor's wife, she was telling him, "You either do as I tell you, or you go to prison." So it is
Right.
in that situation that he.
No, and both, I feel like, yeah, it's like something to ponder upon both ways. Still, it is in accordance with God's will, and God had a plan.
Because then later.
But sometimes you wonder, like, he could have asked just to remove all of that, because he knew he was innocent, and God knew he was innocent.
Yeah. But I mean, for example, when I'm in a situation, it's not like I can think for 5-10 minutes before I give a reply to someone asking me. And maybe, like 1 hour later, I will come up with a better response. But then it's too late. So we have to think about that as well. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, Nudrat. I mean, he could have asked a different prayer and still gone to prison anyways. He had no choice. Unless there was a miracle, of course.
I was listening to one of Rashad's audio, and one person was saying something, "Oh, I couldn't have done that. I rather would have something like that." And Rashad said, "Oops, you called yourself a test,
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, when we believe in...
that was like a different thing, because he was saying like, oh, if I was in his place, like I wouldn't have been able to do that. What God says, like if I was in Moses' mother's place, I wouldn't have been able to throw my baby in the box. And he said, well, you said that. When you said that, you just called yourself a test, and you already failed it, because you said if you were to be put in that position, this is what you would do. So you called yourself a test, and you already failed it by saying it. But like in this case, he's just saying, oh, it's better to be in the prison than to give in to their schemes, because being in prison, he's not going to commit any sort of a sin. Being in prison itself is not a sin. But if he was out of the prison and somehow, Satan was able to afflict him with this kind of sin, and he goes and, acts like these ignorant people, being so good looking and all these women coming after him, then that was worse. So he's just saying, well, it's better for me. But he didn't say that take me into the prison. He just said the prison is better, which is a fact, because it's not a sin. But then he said, but he did ask God to divert the scheming. He didn't say, oh God, please put me in the prison either. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I think when he said, if he was to take the second option, which is to have sex with her and all her friends, he's probably saying like, I might actually end up enjoying it. I might not be just doing it by force, but after being forced to do it, I might become actually a person who actually gives in and actually really likes it. It would totally change who he is.
Yeah, he was afraid that he might succumb to it, and
So
that
it's not like
be,
put me in prison. It's like, no,
um,
which option do you want? And when they ask him the question, well, he's of course talking to God. Well, which one should I take? They ask him, which one are you going to do? And he's like, well, God, he's actually thinking to God about the ultimatum that they have given him.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah,
okay, yeah, I guess, yeah.
that's the way I see it. I'm sure that he wanted to get out of there. I'm sure that there had to be other prayers to God in addition to that. Like,
Yeah.
can you get me out of here, please?
Yeah.
But like imagine him, poor guy. Obviously not poor guy, but he had to have like so much patience that for one scheme after another against him, right? And such heinous, throwing him in a well that he dies or whatever, suffers there, and then going to the jail, in the prison innocently. Um, how much patience, or trust in his heart must be, and then making a mistake in the prison, and then who knows, his prison time was extended by God then, like when he asked the servant to tell your Lord.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, that was a consequence of him not trusting in God
Mm-hmm.
and not asking or
But
idolizing.
seems like something he went through all these hoops to that he eventually, when God only guides us, right? We have to put the effort to purify our soul, and through these tests and everything, that we understand the dynamics and consequences, and eventually we do not commit the same sin again.
At the end of it all, it also served a purpose, because then the governor's wife, she admitted her mistake, and she gave uh, her vouch to the king that uh, that Joseph was put through all that, and he never succumbed. I mean, he never showed any bad behavior. He showed no. He was still truthful and honest, honorable, and she was the governor's wife. So that's a big vouch for him. So the king knew he made the right choice, basically. So it served that purpose. Had it been different, let's say he didn't get, he didn't choose either option that was presented to him, sex or prison, but escaped or fled or whatever, then that situation would never have happened, with the king and the governor's wife vouching for him and all that stuff. So it all served a purpose.
Yeah, God always, at the end, the victory belongs to the believers, right? So after all that, he was gonna be the winner. Masha Allah. So also, when we know, uh, like the patience, I learn a lot from couple of things we like. Seems like Joseph had a lot of patience, and Jacob had much lesser than Joseph. Uh, that and as a child, he was strong. You can tell. So sometimes when we go through trials and tribulations, uh, to put trust in God is so important, and be patient, and implore God constantly that show us the right path in this difficult time, and grant us wisdom and increase our knowledge, and grant us patience so we can go through this test and inshallah pass it. Um, that if every messenger, a young messenger, like a young person, went through such tests, and then obviously we go through tests, and sometimes we become very impatient and start complaining to God, or why me? It's just a lot of lessons in this surah, inshallah.
I guess I didn't think about what Ahmad just said. If was that the king? He interpreted the king's dream, right? That's how he got out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine the king knowing all the tyranny that he went through, and even under that circumstance, he still maintained his righteousness.
Yeah.
That
Because
king must have had a great admiration for him.
yeah, because before he made him the treasurer, he called upon all witnesses before making his judgment regarding Joseph.
Yeah, that will make you. That's a good resume right there.
Solid.
Yeah. The king knew that all he had to do was have sex with you and he wouldn't have had to go to prison. Like, sheesh, why didn't you just do that? Like, that's weird. And king's like, this guy is he's not joking around. Joseph is not joking.
Yeah, I think the king recognized his wisdom, that Joseph values something more than just the material world. Why would he otherwise make him the treasurer? Right? That's you don't give the position of a treasurer to someone greedy or materialistic. You give it to someone who's honest.
Oh yeah, somebody you can trust. Somebody's
Exactly.
proven trustworthy.
Yeah, someone who's like very honorable.
Ah, position of honor. That's what God said.
Yep. It is God. Yeah, but at the end, it is God who decides everything. But it's God's scheming. God made it all to work in His favor. Everything was according to God's plan, and that's the result of it. So that's another lesson we can learn from this surah.
So no matter what evil as we ourselves see people and maybe they try to do bad things to us, we have to still maintain our righteousness. And we can't
Exactly. We have to maintain God's laws.
We can't let them bring us down to their level.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like the
But that's easier to say than it is to do, because it's
Yeah,
easy
yeah,
to
but
just get angry and start screaming at them.
yeah, it's not like if you make a mistake once and it's over. That's not how it is. God give us an entire lifetime to train ourselves to become like these honorable characters, to become the kind of people God wants in paradise.
Yeah, our purification process has to be
Yeah,
complete in
yeah, but
this life. All of our weaknesses be gone before we exit. Otherwise, it was like a little doubt. The biggest one is obviously why God says the only unforgivable sin is the idol worship. Is that if we ever give power to any entity other than God, that this can harm us or benefit us. That means we could not wholeheartedly go to God because God says only those who will come to God wholeheartedly. It's like you completely submit and never ever give power to any other entity to harm them. So the process we go through in this lifetime of purification of and dealing with all our hidden and obvious idols is so important. And then God would put us through such situation where He knows what our weaknesses are and how we can deal with them and eventually be rid of them. You know.
exactly.
You know, Ahmad, you were talking about God gives us our whole lifespan, and I
Yeah,
was you reminded me of something that me and my wife were talking about when we left the Quran study yesterday, and I was talking about the camel, the prophet who said, "Don't kill this camel. This is God's camel," and how as soon as they killed the camel, they were doomed. And I didn't understand it because it was such an easy excuse to justify killing the camel. It's like, come on, a camel, give me a break. It's just a camel. Like this camel is not obeying us. He's not drinking when we say drink, and it's annoying. Or it's like, what do you mean? Why? So if it's God's camel, I should be able to kill it. I shouldn't be able to kill it anyways. Or they could come up with some logical, like the excuse. You can make an excuse against Noah. Like, what are you talking about? We're in the middle of the desert, and you're building a boat. It's so logical to think that he's just nuts. It's like, it's a perfect exit to not believe him. He's tying trees together, and you're standing in the middle of the desert, and you're saying there's going to be a flood. What? It's like, come on, it's so easy not to believe this guy. But the thing is, you say we have our whole life to make this decision, but those people didn't. Those people had, as soon as they made the wrong decision, they had no more life. They were killed in the flood. They killed the camel and they were annihilated. And if you look through time, a lot of people didn't have the chances that we have. We have what God has given us, the miracle. He actually gives us a lot of time to decide, a lot of time to keep looking it over, keep making, are you sure about that? You know, he gives us a whole lifetime. But those people in the past, they didn't have that benefit. It was like, oh, you rejected Noah? Boom, you're dead. We're very lucky. We're very lucky. This math miracle, he made it very easy for us. I'll give you until you die. I'm not going to annihilate you as soon as you reject it like the people of the past. So that guy on YouTube right now, he's very lucky that he wasn't around during the time of Noah, Because during the time of Noah, if he would have done what he did, he would have been dead.
Yeah. No, but it was
So
Assalamu
still
alaikum.
according to God's plan. So
Assalamu
well,
alaikum,
if
everyone.
that was their
Assalamu
lifetime.
alaikum.
Very lucky that he was born today, and he has about maybe 50 more years to rethink about it.
Hmm.
Assalamu
I know.
alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum,
alaikum.
Maria. How are you,
Alaikum.
Masha Allah?
I think I don't know the name. Sorry. Noah. People have the most time ever in the history of human being. People have like 900 plus years. He was giving them the message, and they are rejecting him. It was not like boom right away with Noah. Don't you think like that?
He had 700 more years after the flood, actually, seven something. Yeah, but
Yeah.
he was
So
What
inviting
about
for
the
a long time.
camel? What
Actually,
still,
about?
camel one was the camel
yeah,
miracle
camel
was
one was,
short.
but the Noah people
No,
definitely.
okay. What about the people who were told don't drink from the river, and as soon as
Yeah,
they got to cross the river,
that
they
was
got
immediate.
annihilated because they drank from the river?
But
Uh,
They didn't
also,
get annihilated. They just they didn't have the strength.
Oh yeah.
we
They
have
didn't even cross the river. They
yeah,
were out. That was it.
but we don't know about the history. God is very shortly talk about those communities. They transgressed, they disobeyed, and then they got annihilated. How long it took for them to annihilate it, we don't know. But the Noah, at least
What?
for the Noah, we definitely know about that. Because Noah was talking to God. I give them message night and day. I give
How
them.
long do you think he was tying logs together for? You think he was tying logs together for 900 years?
No. I'm not talking
no,
about nine logs
no,
or
no.
anything. I'm
How
talking
long do
about
you
the
Act,
think they were
message.
watering that camel?
Message he was giving. It was, I think, enough time, enough, maybe
Okay,
no,
century or
okay.
2 century at least.
yeah,
He was building that ark for 2 centuries?
No.
No.
Before
She's
that, he
not
was
saying that.
giving.
She's
I'm
saying
not
that.
saying that. You
No.
misunderstand that. I'm
okay.
Well,
saying
how
he.
long do you think he was telling them to that camel was living? You think the camel was living for hundreds of years that they had to decide?
I'm talking about Noah.
No, no,
Noah's.
she particularly is talking about Noah. She said
No,
Noah's.
she's saying refuting what I was
So
saying
what were
by
you saying
saying
No,
it
no, no,
was
again? I
no.
didn't
I'm not
900
understand.
saying.
years.
I'm just saying that
You
those
didn't understand?
communities have enough time. They
Day and
God,
night,
like
Noah
day and
preached
night
them.
Noah was giving them the message,
But
and
Noah,
they keep
mhm.
rejecting them. That
Hmm.
after that the annihilation came. It's not like that, and God is fair with all the human beings.
What do you mean it's not like that? It was like that. You're making up. You're changing the narrative.
No, I'm not.
Now you're saying that they had so long time to
Yes,
think about it. You think so? No, they
They
didn't.
definitely
had the people
they
of
had.
Noah had quite a bit of time.
Where can you find the verse for
Their
me that
verse
says
says
that?
that he says, "My
Yeah.
Lord, I
There's
called them
verses that
day and
say,
night. I did
Day
this.
and
I
yeah,
night.
did
and God
that."
says, I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
give them enough time. My scheming is formidable. You know the
Yeah.
verse?
Yeah, he didn't give them as much
But
time as he
anyway,
gave us.
here's the
But
thing:
3 days is still a lot.
you are,
Yeah. Well, they
but
didn't deserve enough
I know,
time.
no,
We're
no.
very
But hold
lucky.
on. Here's the difference. I hear what you say. If you show a miracle and people don't believe, you show another miracle. Noah didn't show any miracle. He was inviting them. He told them a news. He said, "A flood will come. Whoever will follow me, come with me, believe me as the messenger of God is gonna be saved." He didn't show them any miracle. He started to make this boat. There was no boat before ever existing, and they were laughing like, "What is this?" He,
It wasn't even a boat, it was trees tied
yeah,
together.
whatever that he was building, because those people probably never saw an ocean or even a river, so were not aware. What is this thing? You
Yeah.
know.
Actually, the verse I
No.
quoted was, I said, I will give them enough rope, not
Mm-hmm.
time. But
Yeah. The only other people who had a lot more chances that not even remotely as long as we've been given were the people of Pharaoh. Because they got multiple they got the 8 plagues or something like that. It's like over and over again, like kept giving them multiple chances. Oh, you reject this, how about this. Besides that, everybody had one shot.
one shot.
And we should be very One shot. And that's why in Surah 54, God asks us, are your disbelievers better than their disbelievers? Because we think like we're taking it for granted.
So,
But maybe
so the people now, I mean, they have a chance, right? So this is a good. I mean, we can just look at the present now. There's so many people that are breaking God's law, and they're being reminded repeatedly. So they are being given a lifetime of chances to, like, even at the time of Rashad Khalifa, like the smoke prophecy, smoke still hasn't arrived, right? And then, so I mean, that's kind of like God's system too, in the sense that in Rashad's case, obviously, it's a little bit different because the miracle is perpetual and they can all see it. But when the time of these other messengers, the miracle was there for that time and space, and they were given enough time until everybody could see the message, the whole community, and they were all like, they did enough damage to incriminate themselves, and then the retribution comes, right? Like God has a certain plan for them that they get to that point. Like they had, like for example, for them to get the annihilation, they had to kill the camel before they could be incriminated. It's kind of like God's system, because they had to provide enough evidence against themselves that justifies their own annihilation. So they do get enough chances to
killing the
rethink their
camel was an
decision.
easy mistake to make. I'll tell you
Hmm?
that. I admit it. Killing that camel was an easy mistake to make.
Mm-hmm.
You got that one shot, you kill that camel, it's over. Math miracle is like you can say, I don't believe it. You can go back and look at it again. You can go back and look at it again. You can walk away. You can come back a few years later if you're still alive. The camel, you kill it, you're dead. You're done. You're going to hell.
Yep. The
One chance.
power of camels.
So when God says in the Quran that He made the Quran easy to learn and He made the religion easy for us, and the math miracle is in fact, like Solomon likes to say, the ultimate miracle. It really is. It really is, because it is a great blessing that He gave us this miracle that we can actually reconsider it until we die.
Inshallah.
It's so merciful. We're lucky He didn't do to us like as soon as we reject it, you're just gonna die in your bed and go to hell.
But also, Rashad said today's time is not like previous time. Communities were very small. Let's say maybe the miracle would have been witnessed by 10 people or a tribe of 50 or 100. Now, annihilation still happens, but because the whole city would not drown, we will see hundreds of
No,
people go in a tsunami, right?
well, you're comparing tsunamis to a God sending a messenger saying this is a sign. If you reject it, you're
No,
gonna get
but
killed. It's not the same thing.
okay, can I finish? If you look at all the what is happening to most of the Muslim countries, you know, what is happening? Suddenly, others are like, they should have been the one, because disbelievers are getting up. Disbelievers are disbelievers. Those who have Quran and not believing in this is like, I see what is happening to Syria, what is happening to um, Egypt, and the other, this country of Saddam Hussein and whatnot. It's like, why this is retribution? If it isn't, then what it is? In every Muslim, the Palestinians, the Kashmiri people, and all that. You pick up a Muslim country, there's problem. Afghanistan, Pakistan. I'm just saying that complete annihilation would not happen now until the doomsday, or the smoke time, maybe majority of the disbelievers, because enough rope is given. The math miracle, God has given this book to be observed by, a whole generation at least. Decide. It's on the computer, it's everywhere. And when those who will reject it, that would be enough time according to the size of this population now is huge, because there could be some believers. Like even there, if there is a one believer in a community, God would not annihilate that community. We know through the example of Lot. Ibrahim had to, those angels had to come and take him out of there, so the whole town would have been annihilated. So now we don't know, but God knows, because the population is so much. Message has come, miracle has come to be observed by this entire generation, and then we'll see what happens. That's why Rasha said within 50 years, that means one generation will witness it through the messenger, the creature. The prophecy of the creature is very significant, because the creature will be announcing these people are done. So it's not like the access isn't there. Just like this person you were talking about, Edward, he knew something about Russia. That's why he started to question. So, you believe in Russia, then this and that, and right? And the word is out there, but the time is given enough. Probably 50 years. Actually, I was reading this article yesterday that undetected meteoroid has started to come around the Earth very close.
My prayers have come true.
What happened?
The meteors, the asteroids.
Oh, it hasn't came yet, right? You were praying for an asteroid, Ahmad?
Yeah, and a whole lot more.
Praying for the smoke in our lives, eh? Is that what you're praying? Secretly.
I didn't know.
Secretly, I pray too.
You're not asking for it to hit San Francisco, are you? Because I'm kind of close to San Francisco.
No, it's like every time. For example, when I hear this certain group, I'm not gonna say it on YouTube, but they promote all kinds of wickedness, and they have weird parades and stuff. Every time I see them, I pray. Where's the asteroid?
Hey, man, it's an 8-hour drive for me. Calm down,
Because
Ahmad.
because when you speak with them, it's like they are hopeless. There's no words reach them. Only God's retribution is like the final argument that they will learn from. I don't know.
I thought the smoke is going to hit mostly people who rejected the Quran. I thought it's going to hit the people who say they're Muslims, but they're not Muslims and they're liars. I thought the smoke is for them, not just all sinners.
I think the smoke.
Is that what you're talking about? The asteroid, the smoke?
No, I'm talking in general.
Oh, I'm confused now. I'm lost.
Well, Messenger said some specific area for asteroid, and that's not gonna be US.
Yay!
You are protected. Inshallah.
Gonna be Canada.
Canada is even much better country than USA.
Oh.
Or maybe not. Maybe not. We have more. Anyways, but
did you just say that on YouTube?
It's just.
You just mentioned a community? Canada? No.
No. I'm talking about the country. Edward, I have no community. I am a solo soldier.
What? Really? You're like
I
a
don't have a community.
ow.
Wolf, lone wolf.
It's been a while. Yeah, I have decided to. I find too much politics in communities, and I have run away from communities. No, I don't trust. Sorry.
So, the broadcast, do you guys think we should continue?
No.
Okay.
You can
Alright.
add so we can.
Unless someone has something else to add to the verses we read, then we can just turn off the broadcast. And I'd like
Yeah,
to
because this. Yeah.
Thank everyone for joining, and God willing, our next study is going to be on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and our teacher is going to be who? Edward,
Me?
is it going to be you? Or no, that's...
Oh,
Oh,
Edward or
Bridget.
me?
You.
Me?
Me. You.
Who? Me? You? Who?
You.
Who?
Nidra, because I might not get out of bed.
Yeah, Edward, I
Okay.
noticed. You're
Like
usually MIA on Saturdays.
that's because there's nobody to show off to
Oh.
get out of bed.
Mm.
Never mind. Reference to a verse.
No, it's
not a
okay.
good one.
I believe it's my turn because usually I can't do on Wednesdays. So, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thanks you, everyone.